Imagine hearing a guitar sound so distinctive that, decades later, a single note can still tell you exactly who played it. That was Jimi Hendrix. But his legacy is more complicated than simply calling him one of the greatest guitarists ever. Hendrix changed what audiences believed the electric guitar could do, yet his influence reached far beyond technique. He challenged expectations about sound, performance, songwriting, and even what a guitar hero could look and sound like. But how much of the Hendrix we remember comes from the musician himself, and how much comes from the enormous mythology built around his name? To understand his true legacy, we have to look past the famous moments and back to the creative journey that made them possible. Jimi Hendrix's story began far from the biggest stages of the late 1960s. Growing up in Seattle, he developed an early fascination with music and eventually found his voice through the guitar. His path was not an overnight transformation. He spent years learning, performing, and working alongside other musicians, absorbing different styles before developing the sound that would eventually become unmistakably his. That background is important because Hendrix did not appear from nowhere. He carried elements of blues, rhythm and blues, soul, and rock into his playing, but he reshaped them through an imagination that seemed almost limitless. The familiar rules of guitar playing were not necessarily restrictions to him. They were starting points. But that wasn't the full story. When Hendrix arrived in London in the mid-1960s, the musical environment around him helped accelerate his development. He connected with musicians and producers who recognized something unusual in his playing. Soon, the Jimi Hendrix Experience began creating music that sounded radically different from much of what audiences had heard before. The difference was not simply volume or technical ability. Hendrix treated the electric guitar as an entire sound world. He used distortion, feedback, effects, rhythm, melody, and dynamics to create textures that could feel spacious one moment and explosive the next. His playing could support a song, answer a vocal line, or suddenly become the center of the composition. What happened next changed the guitar forever. Songs such as Purple Haze, Little Wing, and Voodoo Child became reference points for generations of musicians. Yet Hendrix's importance was not limited to the recordings themselves. His stage presence demonstrated that a guitarist could become a central performer rather than simply standing behind the singer. He also expanded the idea of what a guitar arrangement could accomplish. Hendrix could combine rhythm and lead ideas in ways that made one instrument sound larger than expected. He could play with unusual chord shapes, expressive bends, rhythmic accents, and melodic phrases while maintaining a strong sense of musical identity. Few people noticed just how much this changed the vocabulary of rock guitar. And then there was his willingness to experiment. Hendrix did not seem interested in discovering one formula and repeating it forever. His music continually explored new textures and structures. That curiosity influenced countless guitarists who came after him, from hard rock players to blues musicians, experimental artists, and modern electric guitarists. His influence also extended into popular culture. Hendrix arrived during a period when music was becoming closely connected with changing ideas about art, identity, fashion, and performance. His image became powerful, but sometimes that image could overshadow the musician underneath it. That is where his legacy becomes more complicated. Over time, Hendrix became more than an artist. He became a symbol. New generations discovered his recordings long after they were originally released, and every generation brought its own interpretation of what he represented. Some focused on his technical brilliance. Others heard the blues beneath the experimentation. Some were drawn to his songwriting, while others studied his tone and equipment. But the deeper legacy is found in all of these pieces together. Hendrix showed musicians that innovation does not require abandoning tradition. He could take the vocabulary of the blues and transform it into something that sounded futuristic. He could make a simple melody feel enormous through tone and phrasing. And perhaps most importantly, he demonstrated that an instrument does not have to be played according to expectations. His career was remarkably brief, yet the creative ideas he introduced continued developing long after his original recordings. Guitarists still study his phrasing. Producers still examine his approach to sound. Songwriters still draw inspiration from the balance between melody and experimentation. That may be the most meaningful way to understand Jimi Hendrix. His legacy is not simply a collection of famous performances or legendary guitar moments. It is the idea that music can expand when an artist stops asking what an instrument is supposed to do and starts asking what else it might become. Decades later, the question surrounding Hendrix is no longer simply why he became famous. It is why his music still feels capable of discovery. And perhaps that is the real measure of his legacy. Not that he gave the guitar a final definition, but that he made the instrument feel limitless.